Imagine working for 40 years with one goal in mind: retire, relax, and finally enjoy the life you've been building. Then one afternoon, you sit down with your savings, your expected income, and your monthly expenses, and something doesn't add up. The numbers say you may not have enough. In that moment, most people do exactly the same thing. They start searching for the perfect investment, a hidden opportunity, or some financial product that promises to make up for lost time. But what if that's the wrong question? What if the real solution has nothing to do with finding higher investment returns? And what if 5 years could completely change the outcome? I'm Tom, and today we're going to walk through a practical retirement rescue plan. No miracle investments, no complicated products, just a series of financial decisions that can dramatically improve retirement security for many people who feel they're running out of time. Because here's something that often gets overlooked. Retirement isn't a finish line. Sometimes it's the beginning of your second chance. Let's meet John. John isn't a real person. He's a fictional example built from a situation that reflects many American households approaching retirement. John is 65 years old. He and his wife have spent decades working, raising a family, paying bills, and saving whenever they could. They aren't reckless with money. In fact, they've done many things right. They've avoided major debt problems. They've built a modest retirement portfolio. Most of their retirement income will come from Social Security. And they still have a mortgage that's almost, but not quite paid off. For years, John believed everything would work itself out once retirement arrived. Then he finally sits down and does the math. That's when reality hits. The income they expect doesn't comfortably support the retirement lifestyle they imagined. Not because they want luxury. Not because they're trying to spend excessively. Simply because everyday living still costs money, and their income falls short. This is the point where many people panic. They start believing they need extraordinary investment returns to solve an ordinary financial problem. They look at advertisements for alternative investments, expensive financial products, or strategies that promise to catch up quickly. But before changing investments, let's step back and ask a much simpler question. Where is the actual problem? Imagine drawing two boxes on a whiteboard. The first box says money in. The second says money out. Now connect them with two arrows. That's retirement in its simplest form. Every month, money flows into your household through sources like Social Security, pensions, work income, or investment withdrawals. At the same time, money flows out through housing, groceries, healthcare, transportation, insurance, and everything else life requires. If more money is leaving than entering, the problem isn't necessarily your investments. The problem is the gap between those two arrows. And that's incredibly important because gaps can often be fixed in more than one way. A retirement problem usually isn't an investment problem first. It's a cash flow problem. Fix the cash flow, and many retirement decisions become much easier. Now, before we start building John's plan, there's one concern we need to clear up. It's probably the same question many viewers are asking right now. What if I keep working? Immediately, another question follows. Won't working reduce my Social Security? It's one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding retirement. Here's the simple explanation. If someone claims Social Security before reaching full retirement age and continues earning above certain annual limits, part of their benefit may be temporarily withheld under what's known as the earnings test. That sounds alarming, but there's one word that changes everything. Temporarily, for many people, those withheld benefits aren't permanently lost. Once full retirement age is reached, Social Security recalculates future payments to account for those earlier withholdings. In simple terms, it's often a delay, not a lifetime penalty. That completely changes how we should think about working later in life. Instead of asking, Will working hurt my retirement? We should ask, how much could working improve it? That's exactly the question John decides to answer. Rather than retiring immediately, he and his wife choose something much more realistic. They commit to working one additional year on a part-time basis. Nothing extreme. No exhausting schedule. Just enough earned income to supplement their retirement income while continuing to live on the same budget they've already planned. And this is where many households unknowingly make a costly mistake. When income goes up, spending quietly follows. A nicer vacation, a newer vehicle, more dinners out. Financial planners often call this lifestyle inflation when higher income leads to higher spending instead of higher savings. John refuses to let that happen. Picture another whiteboard. Draw one large bucket. Write only 2 words on it. Future freedom. Every extra dollar John earns goes into that bucket. Then, instead of investing it immediately, he sends those dollars toward the biggest monthly expense standing between him and a secure retirement: his mortgage. Think about the chain reaction. Draw a row of dominoes. As the mortgage balance falls, monthly expenses fall with it. Lower monthly expenses mean retirement requires less income every single month. At the same time, John hasn't withdrawn a single dollar from his investment portfolio. His investments stay exactly where they are, giving them something incredibly valuable: more time to compound. Nothing about this strategy is flashy. It doesn't depend on predicting the stock market. It doesn't require exotic investments. It simply improves the math behind retirement. And surprisingly, this first year isn't where the biggest transformation happens. It's only the first domino. Because once that mortgage begins disappearing, every dollar John earns afterward becomes dramatically more powerful. Last time, we left John after his first year back at work. He hadn't made a single risky investment. He hadn't withdrawn money from his retirement savings. Instead, every extra dollar had one mission: reduce debt. That may not sound exciting, but here's where retirement planning becomes surprisingly powerful. Because once your biggest monthly payment starts disappearing, every future paycheck begins working much harder. Let's keep following John's timeline. Picture a simple calendar on the whiteboard. Year 1. Part-time work, extra income, mortgage balance shrinking, portfolio untouched. Now slide that calendar forward 1 year. John reaches full retirement age. This is an important milestone because several retirement rules become much more flexible. For many people, earning additional income after reaching full retirement age no longer triggers the same earnings test that applies before reaching it. That changes John's options considerably. Instead of working part-time, he and his wife decide to return to full-time work for a limited period. Notice the phrase limited period. This isn't about working forever. It's about creating a stronger retirement for the years that follow. That mindset changes everything. Their household income increases significantly. But something even more important doesn't change: their lifestyle. Imagine drawing a straight horizontal line across the whiteboard. Label it living expenses. Even though income rises, that line stays perfectly flat. John doesn't upgrade his house. He doesn't buy a luxury vehicle. He doesn't increase everyday spending just because there's more money coming in. Every dollar above that line has a job. First, it finishes paying off the mortgage. Once the mortgage reaches 0, something remarkable happens. Draw another arrow. The money that used to go toward monthly mortgage payments doesn't disappear. It simply changes direction. Now it flows straight into savings and investments. That's one of the biggest turning points in the entire plan. The same dollars that once reduced debt are now building wealth. Without earning a higher investment return, without taking additional market risk, John has dramatically increased the amount he's investing every year. The most valuable investment isn't always the one with the highest return. Sometimes it's eliminating an expense that keeps costing you every month. Now pause for a moment. If you were watching John's retirement account, you might think the biggest improvement came from investment growth. It didn't. The biggest improvement came from behavior. Think about everything happening at once. His mortgage is gone. His monthly expenses are lower. He's contributing new money to his portfolio. And because he's still working, he hasn't started withdrawing retirement savings. Those four forces are all working together. Imagine four arrows pointing toward one larger bucket. Each arrow represents one financial advantage. Lower debt, higher savings, no portfolio withdrawals, more time for compounding. On their own, each one helps. Combined, they become much more powerful. This is why retirement planning isn't just about picking investments. It's about creating a system where multiple financial decisions reinforce one another. But now, another question naturally comes up. If John is already working until age 70, should he also delay his Social Security benefits? At first glance, it sounds like an easy decision. Waiting beyond full retirement age increases future Social Security benefits through delayed retirement credits, up to age 70. That means larger monthly checks for the rest of retirement. Sounds like an obvious choice. Except retirement decisions are rarely that simple. Let's imagine two paths. On the left side of the whiteboard, right, option 1, continue receiving Social Security while working. On the right side, right, option 2, delay benefits to receive larger monthly payments later. Which one is better? The honest answer is, it depends. If John delays his benefits, he'll eventually receive larger monthly payments. That's a real advantage, especially for someone who expects a long retirement. But delaying those checks also means giving up years of income today. Without those payments arriving each month, there's less cash available to pay living expenses or invest. In other words, one side of the equation improves while another becomes weaker. This is where many retirement discussions become misleading. People often talk about maximizing one number, higher Social Security, higher investment returns, higher portfolio value. But retirement isn't about maximizing one number. It's about balancing several numbers at the same time. John's goal isn't simply to receive the largest Social Security check possible. His goal is financial security. Those aren't always the same thing. For John's situation, continuing to receive Social Security while working creates more cash flow during these rebuilding years. That extra income allows more money to flow into investments after the mortgage is gone. The result is a larger investment portfolio entering retirement. Could delaying benefits still be the better decision for someone else? Absolutely. Someone with exceptional longevity, different income sources, or different priorities might reasonably choose the opposite path. That's why retirement planning should never rely on one universal rule. It should fit the person. The best retirement strategy isn't the one that maximizes a single benefit. It's the one that creates the strongest overall financial position. Now we're approaching the most rewarding part of John's journey. 5 years ago, retirement looked uncertain. Today, the mortgage is gone. His investment portfolio has continued growing. New savings have been added year after year. And perhaps most importantly, he never forced his investments to do a job they weren't ready to do. Instead of withdrawing from them too early, he gave them something every investor wishes they had: more contributions, more time, and more opportunities to compound. But John's story still isn't finished, because building retirement savings is only half the challenge. The next question is even more important. Once you've finally reached retirement with a stronger financial foundation, how do you actually turn those savings into dependable income without running out of money? Over the past 5 years, John didn't rescue his retirement with a lucky investment or a perfect market prediction. He did it by making a series of disciplined financial decisions. He reduced debt. He controlled spending. He continued earning income for a few more years, and he gave his investments something they can never create on their own: time. Now comes the question every retiree eventually faces. How do you turn decades of savings into an income that lasts? This is where many people become nervous. They're comfortable saving money. They're comfortable investing money. But spending that money? That's much harder. After all, once retirement begins, there isn't another paycheck waiting 2 weeks later. Every withdrawal feels permanent. So instead of asking, "How much money do I have?" Tom encourages viewers to ask a better question: how much income can my savings safely produce? Those are two very different questions. Imagine drawing one final whiteboard illustration. On the left is a large bucket labeled retirement savings. On the right is a smaller bucket labeled monthly income. A small pipe connects the two. The goal isn't to empty the large bucket as quickly as possible. The goal is to let money flow out at a pace that gives the bucket the best chance of lasting throughout retirement. That's why retirement planning isn't just about building wealth, it's also about managing withdrawals wisely. John understands this. Because he worked a few extra years, his situation looks very different than it did at age 65. His mortgage is gone. His monthly expenses are lower. His portfolio has continued growing without early withdrawals. His retirement income sources are stronger than they were just a few years earlier. That changes everything. Think about the pressure on his savings. 5 years ago, his portfolio needed to do almost all the heavy lifting. Now, it has help. Monthly expenses have fallen. Social Security provides a foundation of guaranteed income. His savings become a supplement instead of carrying the entire retirement by themselves. That's an enormous difference. Picture a simple scale on the whiteboard. 5 years earlier, the investment portfolio sat alone on one side trying to balance every expense. Now add 3 more weights to the other side. Lower debt. Lower monthly expenses. Guaranteed income. The scale suddenly becomes much more balanced. The strongest retirement isn't built by asking your investments to do everything. It's built by giving them as much support as possible. Of course, none of this means everyone should delay retirement by exactly 5 years. Every household is different. Some people have health concerns. Others become caregivers for family members. Some have pensions. Others don't. Retirement planning is personal. The lesson isn't that there's one perfect timeline. The lesson is that you usually have more choices than you think. Sometimes one additional year of work creates meaningful flexibility. Sometimes reducing one recurring expense changes the entire retirement budget. Sometimes delaying large purchases protects years of future financial security. Small decisions often create surprisingly large long-term results. That's the real message behind John's story. Notice what never happened. He never found a magical investment. He never doubled his money overnight. He never tried to beat the market. Instead, he focused on the decisions completely within his control. How long to work? How much to spend? How quickly to eliminate debt? When to begin drawing on retirement savings? Those choices quietly transformed a retirement that once looked uncertain into one that felt far more secure. That's an encouraging reminder for anyone who's worried they've started planning too late. Your retirement isn't determined by one decision. It's shaped by hundreds of small decisions made consistently over time. And if you're only a few years away from retirement, that should be reassuring. Because even if you can't go back 20 years, you can still make the next 5 years count. I'm Tom, and if today's discussion helped you see retirement from a different perspective, I hope you'll carry one idea with you. Don't measure your retirement only by the size of your portfolio. Measure it by the strength of the financial system you've built around it. A well-managed retirement isn't simply about accumulating the most money. It's about creating reliable income, reducing unnecessary financial pressure, and giving yourself the confidence to enjoy the years you've worked so hard to reach. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.